Trill adjusted his optical sensors as he reviewed his thesis notes once more. The young Van Durian exchange student had spent a full rotation cycle at the Intergalactic Peace Academy on Earth, and what he discovered contradicted everything his species believed about humans. "Professor Davis, I don't understand," Trill said, his bioluminescent skin pulsing with confusion. "That historical data doesn't match our textbooks." The human professor leaned back in her chair, her weathered face bearing the patient expression Trill had come to recognize during their many discussions. The office walls were lined with artifacts from countless worlds, diplomatic gifts that told their own story of interspecies cooperation. "What troubles you, Trill?" she asked. "According to our records, humans conquered their solar system through superior military might. You're classified as a warrior species that other civilizations should approach with caution." Trill's appendages trembled slightly. "But my research indicates something entirely different." Professor Davis smiled. "And what have you found?" "Humans could have dominated the galaxy centuries ago. Your species mastered nuclear fission before developing reliable space travel. You created planet-killing weapons before meeting your first alien neighbor." Trill's voice modulator raised in pitch. "By all logical analysis, you should have conquered every civilization you encountered. Yet we didn't," the professor replied. "No, that's what I can't comprehend." Trill's color shifted to a vibrant blue of academic excitement. "Humans repeatedly chose restraint when aggression would have been easier. My thesis concludes that humans avoid war not out of weakness, but out of mercy." The word hung in the air between them. "An interesting conclusion," Professor Davis said. "Let's test your theory. What example from human history supports this?" Trill activated his datapad. "The first contact crisis with the Aurelian Collective. Their exploratory fleet entered your system without permission in 2189, disabled several orbital platforms, and established a mining base on your moon." "A tense situation," the professor acknowledged. "According to my calculations, Earth forces could have obliterated their entire fleet within 4 hours. Your weapons systems had clear superiority. Instead, you attempted communication for 3 weeks before firing a single shot, and even then, it was merely to disable one small vessel." The professor nodded. "And what happened next?" "That's the most puzzling part. Once communication was established and the Aurelians explained their cultural misunderstanding about territorial boundaries, humans helped repair their damaged ship and establish diplomatic relations." Trill's skin flickered with incredulity. "My people would have perceived the incursion as an act of war, demanding immediate retaliation. The most logical response would have been to demonstrate overwhelming force to prevent future threats." Professor Davis rose and walked to the window overlooking the academy grounds. Students of dozens of species mingled below. "Trill, what is the average lifespan of a Van Durian?" "Approximately 400 Earth years," Trill replied. "Humans typically live less than a quarter of that time," she said softly. "Perhaps that gives us a different perspective on conflict." Trill processed this information. "You avoid unnecessary bloodshed because your lives are shorter." "Partially. We've also learned from our mistakes. Human history is filled with wars we now regret, conflicts born of misunderstanding, fear, or pride that could have been resolved through patience and communication." The professor turned back to face her student. "There's something else your research may have missed. Humans don't avoid war because we're weak or incapable. We avoid it precisely because we excel at it." Trill's coloration darkened. "I don't understand." "Humanity's scientific and technological progress has often been accelerated by conflict. During our world wars, we developed aviation, nuclear power, advanced medicine, and countless other innovations at unprecedented speeds. War drives human ingenuity in terrifying ways." She returned to her desk. "We avoid war not just to protect others, but to protect ourselves from what we might become if we embraced conflict as our primary path forward." Trill sat in silence, his species equivalent of deep contemplation. Finally, he spoke. "This will be controversial on my homeworld. The Van Durian High Command has based much of our defensive posture on the assumption that humans are aggressive expansionists who must be contained. And now? Now I must report that humans are potentially more dangerous than we thought. Not because you want to conquer, but because you choose not to. Shrill's appendages moved in an expression of wonder. The mercy of a species that could destroy but doesn't is more frightening than any weapon. Professor Davis smiled. Perhaps that's the most important lesson of diplomacy, Trill. True strength isn't measured by the harm one can inflict, but by the restraint one chooses to exercise. As Trill departed the office, his mind raced with implications. The professors at the Van Durian Military Academy had taught him that humans were simple creatures, dangerous but predictable. How wrong they had been. His thesis would shock his people, challenge their assumptions, and perhaps even change their approach to interstellar relations. Humans weren't avoiding war out of weakness. They were choosing peace despite their capacity for devastating conflict. It was mercy, yes, but mercy born of wisdom rather than softness, the kind of mercy that came from a species that had stared into the abyss of its own extinction and decided to walk a different path. Trill looked up at the Earth sky, so different from his homeworlds, and felt a newfound respect for the short-lived, unpredictable humans who had welcomed him here to learn their ways. Perhaps his people had much to learn from them after all.